The girl held a kitchen knife with both hands and stood between the stranger and her mother. She was 11 years old. Behind her, a boy buried his face in a dog's neck and would not look up. The woman on the floor had a revolver aimed at the man's chest. Her hand was bleeding through the bandage. Her lips were blue. The gun was empty, but he did not know that yet. And the dog, the one creature that had never disobeyed him in 8 years, was wrapped around her children and refused to move. Subscribe to our channel for new emotional stories every day. Stay until the end. This one will stay with you longer than you expect. Drop a comment with the city you're watching from so I can see how far this story travels. The howl woke him. Not a bark. Boone never howled. 8 years Jesse Thornton had owned that dog, and not once had the animal made a sound like this. Low, long, rising through the walls of the ranch house like something pulled out of the ground. Jesse was off the chair before he thought about it. The bridle he had been working on hit the floor. He grabbed his coat, his hat, the Winchester, and kicked the front door open into a wall of white. December in Wyoming Territory. Snow driving sideways. Wind so cold it burned his lungs on the first breath. Boone was gone. The barn door was open, tracks already half filled, heading north toward the pines. Boone! Nothing. Just that howl again, farther now, pulling away from him like a rope going taut. 8 years. That dog never broke command. Not when a grizzly stood up 30 yards from the herd. Not when lightning split the barn roof and the horses went out of their minds. Jesse had once watched Boone hold a rattlesnake at bay for 40 minutes without moving a muscle, just standing there growling until Jesse could get a clean shot. That dog did not run from things, and he did not run toward things without reason. Jesse saddled his mare in the dark and rode into the storm. He found Boone a quarter-mile past the north fence, the old trapper's cabin, half buried in snow, door hanging crooked on its hinges. Boone was flat on his belly in front of that door, whining, pawing at the wood. Jesse dismounted, drew the Winchester, pushed the door open with his boot. The woman had the revolver up before the door finished swinging. "Don't come closer." She was sitting against the back wall, auburn hair loose and tangled, hanging across a face that was white with cold. Not pale. White. The kind of color that meant she was running out of time. Her left hand was wrapped in a bloody cloth, the knot half tied. Her right hand held the gun steady enough to kill him. Jesse raised both hands. "Easy, I ain't—" "Mama!" His eyes found them. 3 children in the corner behind her. The oldest girl standing with a kitchen knife gripped in both fists, feet planted, jaw locked. She had her mother's auburn hair, her mother's jaw, and eyes that had no business being that hard in a face that young. Behind the girl, a smaller one, 6 or 7, pressed flat against the wall. Not crying. Her eyes were wide open, dry, watching Jesse the way a rabbit watches a hawk. And the littlest one, a boy, maybe 5, curled into a ball on the floor with his coat pulled over his head, shaking. Jesse's chest went tight. "Ma'am, I'm going to put this rifle on the ground." "You're going to leave." "My name is Jesse Thornton. My ranch is a quarter-mile south. That's my dog outside your door." He laid the Winchester on the floor, slow, loud enough for her to hear the wood. "I'm unbuckling my pistol now." "I said leave." "Your fire's been dead for hours. Your children are shaking. Your hand's still bleeding through that wrap. And it's going to be 20 below before midnight." He set the gun belt next to the rifle and stepped back. "I leave you here, you don't make it to sunrise. You know that." She knew it. He could see the knowing in her face, in the way her jaw worked, in the way her eyes cut to the children and back to him. She was doing math, the kind of math that has no good answers. "Hannah," she said without looking away from Jessie, "how is Lucy?" The older girl glanced down. "She's cold, Mama, real cold, and Sam won't stop shaking." The woman's throat moved. One hard swallow. The revolver dropped 2 inches. Boone pushed past Jessie's legs. The dog crossed the cabin and went straight to the boy on the floor. Not to the woman, not to the girls. To the smallest one, the one who was shaking worst. Boone lay down beside him and pressed his body along the child's back. Warm fur against a thin coat. The boy froze. Then one small hand crept out from under the coat and grabbed a fistful of Boone's fur. The shaking slowed. The younger girl whispered, "Mama, the dog is warm." "I see him, Lucy. Can I touch him?" "Stay where you are." Lucy did not stay where she was. She crawled forward on her hands and knees and pressed herself against Boone's other side, burying her face in his neck. Boone did not move. He lay there like he'd been waiting for these children his whole life. Jessie watched the woman watch her children wrap themselves around his dog. Something cracked in her face. Just a fracture. Just enough to show what was underneath the steel. She lowered the revolver to her lap. "The fire," she said. "Build the fire." "Yes, ma'am." He moved to the hearth. Dead ashes, a few scraps of charred wood. He went outside, broke branches from the nearest pine, stripped bark for kindling, and had flames up in 4 minutes. Heat pushed back into the cabin like a living thing. "I need to look at your hand," he said. "No. That bleeding hasn't stopped. In this cold, I know what happens in this cold. I was a teacher, not an idiot. I know about frostbite, and I know about infection. And I know that if I take this bandage off right now, I'll start bleeding again, and I won't be able to hold this gun. That gun's empty." The silence hit the room like a hand slamming a table. The older girl, Hannah, stared at her mother. The woman's face did not change, but her knuckles went white around the grip. "How long have you known?" she asked. "Since you cocked it the second time. The cylinder didn't rotate right. Either it's jammed or there's nothing in it. And the way you've been holding it tells me you know there's nothing in it. And you still put your guns down. You needed me to." She stared at him for a long time. The fire crackled. Lucy murmured something to Boone. Sam had not moved, but his shaking had stopped. "Eleanor Sullivan," the woman said. "Ma'am, that's my name, Eleanor Sullivan. If you're going to save my life, you should at least know whose life you're saving." "Miss Sullivan." "Don't call me Mrs. I don't carry his name. Not anymore." Jessie filed that. He didn't push it. "Eleanor, then. Will you let me see your hand?" She unwrapped the cloth. The cut ran deep across her palm, base of the thumb to the wrist. She'd started stitching it herself. 2 sutures in, uneven, the needle still lying on the floor with bloody thread. She'd run out of strength, or run out of nerve, and Jessie guessed it was strength, because this woman did not look like someone who ran out of nerve. "Wagon tongue," she said before he asked. "The axle snapped in the storm. Metal edge caught me when I grabbed for it." "Where's the wagon?" "A mile south, maybe more. I unhitched the horse, put the children on, tried to ride. Horse threw us in a drift and bolted." "You walked." "I carried Sam. Hannah walked. I held Lucy's hand. We found this cabin before dark." She said it like she was reading a list. No emotion, no drama. Just facts, delivered in the flat voice of someone who could not afford to feel what had happened to her, until she knew her children would survive it. "How long?" Jessie asked. "Since yesterday afternoon." "Over 20 hours. 3 children. No fire. Bleeding hand. Wyoming blizzard." Jessie reached for the needle on the floor. He picked it up and looked at her. "I've stitched horses, cattle. And my own leg once when a fence wire caught me. I ain't gentle and I ain't pretty, but I can close that wound. Do it. He stitched her hand by firelight. She did not flinch. She did not make a sound. She watched his hands the entire time, and Jessie understood she was not watching the stitching. She was watching to see if his hands would do anything other than what they were supposed to do. He tied off the last suture and sat back. "Hannah," Eleanor said. "Yes, Mama?" "Put the knife down, sweetheart." Hannah looked at the kitchen knife in her hands. She looked at Jessie. She set the knife on the floor beside her knee. Not far. Close enough to grab. Jessie said nothing about that. If the girl needed the knife within reach, the knife stayed within reach. "My ranch is a quarter-mile south," he said. "Stone house, wood stove, food, blankets. I can get all of you there in 15 minutes. "And then what?" "And then you take the house. I sleep in the barn." "Why?" "Because it's my barn, and you're not sleeping in it." "That's not what I'm asking." "I know what you're asking, and I don't have an answer that'll satisfy you. I'm a stranger. You've got no reason to trust me and every reason not to. All I can tell you is that dog has never lain down with a stranger in his life, and right now, your son is using him as a pillow." Eleanor looked at Sam. The boy was asleep, both arms around Boone's neck, face buried in the fur, breathing slow and steady for the first time since Jessie had walked in. "Mama?" Hannah's voice, quiet, careful. "Nobody followed us here, right?" Jessie caught it. The way Eleanor's body went rigid for half a second. The way her eyes snapped to the cabin door. Not checking for the storm. Checking for something else. "Nobody followed us, baby," Eleanor said. But her hand moved back to the empty revolver in her lap. Jessie did not ask. Not now. He stood. "I'll carry Sam. You ride my horse with the girls. Boone will lead us." "I can carry my own son." "You've got one working hand and you haven't slept in 30 hours. You carry Sam through those drifts and you'll both go down. Let me take him. I'll keep him against my chest. He won't even wake up." Eleanor's jaw tightened. She looked at Jessie's hands. Big hands, rough from 8 years of fence posts and saddle leather. Hands that could hurt a child without trying. He saw her looking. He knew what she was calculating. "I held my brother when he died," Jessie said. He did not plan to say it. It came out like a rock dislodged from a hillside. "He was 16. Shiloh, 1862. He bled out in my arms, calling for our mother. I held him for 2 hours after he was gone, because I couldn't make myself let go." He stopped. His throat had closed up on him. He swallowed hard and pushed through it. "I know how to hold someone small, Eleanor. And I know what it costs to let someone else do it." The cabin was quiet except for the fire and Boone's breathing. "Sam," Eleanor said softly. "Sam, honey, this man is going to carry you. Boone is coming too." Sam did not open his eyes. He reached up with both arms, the way a small child reaches in the dark, and Jessie lifted him. The boy weighed nothing. Not nothing like a child who was small for his age. Nothing like a child who had not been fed enough. Jessie felt bone through the coat. Ribs he should not have been able to count. Something locked shut inside Jessie's chest. Cold. Hard. Permanent. He held the boy against him and walked out into the storm. Eleanor mounted his mare. Hannah climbed up behind her, arms around her mother's waist. Lucy sat in front, tucked between Eleanor's arms and the saddle horn. Boone ran ahead, cutting through drifts, finding the path like the storm was something he could read. They moved through the white. Halfway to the ranch, Sam stirred against Jesse's chest. The boy's hand came up and grabbed the collar of Jesse's coat. Small fingers, frozen at the tips, holding on. Jesse pulled the boy tighter and bent his head over him to block the wind. He had not held anything this carefully since his brother. "Mama," Lucy said from the horse. "Mama, the dog knows where he's going." "Hush, Lucy." "But he does. He's taking us somewhere." "I said hush." Hannah spoke then, quiet enough that the wind almost took it. "It's all right, Mama. I think it's all right." Eleanor did not answer, but her hand moved from the reins to Hannah's arm wrapped around her waist, and she squeezed once. Hard. The kind of squeeze that says, "I'm sorry," and "I love you," and "I'm trying," all at the same time. The ranch house came out of the snow like something solid in a world that had gone to smoke. Stone walls, cedar roof, the chimney still breathing a thin line of heat where Jesse had banked the fire before he left. Inside, heat, light, the smell of coffee and wood smoke, and the beef broth Jesse had made that morning. He set Sam down by the fire. Boone was already there, and the boy went to the dog without a word. Lucy followed. Hannah stayed next to her mother and watched Jesse the way a sentry watches a gate. Eleanor stood in the doorway. She looked at the room, the bookshelf, the handmade table, the rifle rack, the kitchen with its iron stove, a quilt folded on the chair that looked old enough to be someone's grandmother's work. "You built this," she said. "My father started it. I finished it." Her eyes moved across the joints where wall met wall. "He taught you well." "He taught me enough." She stepped inside but did not sit down. She positioned herself between the door and her children, back to the wall, eyes on both windows. Old habits. The habits of someone who had mapped every exit in every room she'd entered for a very long time. Jessie put water on the stove, found clean cloth for her hand, warmed the broth and poured it into cups and set them on the floor where Eleanor could reach them without moving away from her children. "There's bread in the box, blankets in the trunk." "Where will you be?" "The barn. Wood stove out there keeps it warm enough." He picked up his coat. At the door, he stopped. He did not turn around, because what he was about to say was easier to say facing the dark. "I'm going to ask you something, Eleanor. You don't have to answer tonight. You don't have to answer at all. But I need to ask." "Ask." "Who's coming?" The silence behind him was thick enough to touch. "What makes you think someone's coming? Your girl asked if anybody followed you. You checked that door 6 times in 20 minutes, and not once because of the wind. And you've been running long enough that your boy is 10 pounds lighter than he should be." He heard her breathing change, heard Hannah shift on the floor. "His name is Edmund Hale," Eleanor said. Her voice was different now, stripped, the way a bone sounds when you scrape off the last of the meat. "He is their father. He is a lawyer in Boston. He has money and friends in high places, and a court order signed by a judge that says these children are his property." "Children ain't property." "The law in Massachusetts says otherwise. A father's right to custody is absolute. A mother has none. I have no legal claim to my own children, Jessie. Not one." "Is that why you ran?" "I ran because he broke Hannah's arm when she spilled ink on his papers. She was 10 years old. He grabbed her and twisted until the bones snapped, and then he told the doctor she fell down the stairs. And the doctor believed him because Edmund Hale is a respectable man." Jessie turned around. Hannah was sitting on the floor, with her knees pulled to her chest, staring at the fire. Her left arm, he could see it now, the way she held it slightly different from the right, slightly careful. He locked Sam in a coal cellar for 4 hours because the boy cried at dinner, Eleanor continued. Her voice was steady. Her eyes were not. Sam was 3. When I pulled him out, he couldn't stop screaming. He didn't speak again for 2 months. Jesse gripped the doorframe. The wood groaned under his hand. And Lucy? Lucy he never touched. Lucy was his favorite. He used her against the other 2. If Hannah misbehaved, Lucy got dessert, and Hannah got nothing. If Sam cried, Victor would hold Lucy on his lap and tell her what a good girl she was, while Sam stood in the corner. That's its own kind of cruelty. Yes, it is, and Lucy knows it. She knows what her father did with her love, and she is 7 years old, and she already understands that being the favorite is not the same as being safe. Jesse breathed through his nose, slow, controlled, the way he breathed when a horse was panicking and bought a wagon and went south because I bought a wagon and went south because I heard there was a doctor in Elk Hollow who might help me. A woman named Agnes Whitmore. She knew my mother. I know Agnes. Is she real? Is she actually there? Because I have been trusting people for 6 weeks, and the last man who offered to help me stole half my money while I slept in his boarding house. Agnes Whitmore is the most real person in this territory. She'll skin me alive if she finds out I let you sleep in a cabin with no fire. Eleanor almost smiled. Not quite. The ghost of a thing that had once been easy and was now the hardest work in the world. He hired someone, she said. A man named Silas Crane, a detective. He tracks people for money. Edmund sent him after me with papers, legal papers, saying I kidnapped my own children. Did Crane follow you here? I don't know. I lost him in Cheyenne, I think. I'm not sure. I'm not sure of anything anymore. Jesse put his hat on. He stepped onto the porch and looked out at the snow falling thick and silent across his land. Then he looked back at her. Eleanor, I don't know much about lawyers or courts or legal papers from Boston, but I know this valley. I know every ranch and every trail and every man within 20 miles. And I know that anyone who comes onto my land to take children from their mother is going to have to come through me first. You don't know what he's capable of. No, ma'am, but I know what I'm capable of, and I haven't found the edge of it yet. He closed the door. The bolt slid shut on the inside. Her side. Her choice. Jesse crossed the yard through the storm and pushed into the barn. He lit the stove. He lay down in the hay with his coat over him and his boots still on, and stared at the ceiling while the wind tried to tear the world apart outside. He thought about a boy who weighed nothing, a girl who held a knife like she knew she might have to use it, a woman who walked through a blizzard with a bleeding hand and 3 children and an empty gun and never once stopped moving forward. And he thought about a man in Boston who broke a 10-year-old's arm and called it discipline. Jesse's hands curled into fists in the hay. His jaw locked. His brother's face came to him the way it always did when the anger got too big. Daniel, at 16, blood in his mouth, asking Jesse to tell their mother something kind. You'd have liked her, Danny, Jesse whispered. You'd have stood right where I'm standing. He closed his eyes. Sleep did not come. It never came easy. But the wind was familiar, and the dark was his. And somewhere in the house, Boone was lying between 3 children, keeping watch the way only a dog can, with a faith that does not ask questions, and a loyalty that does not count the cost. Eleanor sat against the wall of a stranger's house, with her children sleeping around her, and a bolt on the door that she controlled. She listened. For footsteps. For the creak of a floorboard. For the particular rhythm of a man's breathing that she had memorized across 10 years of nights when sleeping meant danger. She heard wind. She heard fire. She heard Boone's steady exhale beside her son. Hannah murmured in her sleep and rolled toward her mother. Eleanor pulled her close with her good hand and pressed her lips to her daughter's hair. "I'm going to fix this," she whispered. "I'm going to fix all of it. I promise." The promise tasted like blood and iron and something she had almost forgotten the name of. She held it on her tongue and let it burn. Outside, the blizzard buried the road south and the road north, and every track that might lead a man from Boston to a ranch in Wyoming. And in the barn, a dog who had never once been wrong lifted his head and looked toward the house, toward the woman and the children he had chosen, and thumped his tail once against the hay. Not because the danger was over, because he had decided it did not matter. Eleanor woke to the sound of chopping. She was on the floor, her back against the wall. Hannah curled into her right side, and Lucy sprawled across her lap. Sam was 3 feet away, still wrapped around Boone, the dog's chin resting on the boy's shoulder. Gray light was coming through the window. The storm had stopped. The chopping came again, steady, rhythmic, axe on wood. Eleanor's hand went to the revolver on the floor beside her before she remembered it was empty. She eased Hannah off her arm, moved Lucy to the blanket, and stood. Her left hand throbbed. The stitches pulled when she flexed her fingers, but they held. Whoever this Jesse Thornton was, he could sew. She went to the window. He was in the yard, splitting firewood. No coat. Sleeves rolled to his elbows, despite the cold. His breath came out in white clouds, and his arms moved with a kind of mechanical precision that told her he had done this 10,000 times. There was a stack of split logs beside him that was already knee-high. He had been out there a while. Eleanor watched him for a full minute. She watched the way he set each log on the block, the way his shoulders moved, the way he paused between swings to scan the tree line and the road. He was checking, the same way she checked. Not for weather, for people. The door opened behind her. She spun. Hannah was standing there, the kitchen knife in her hand again. "Mama, who is he?" "His name is Jesse Thornton. He owns this ranch." "Are we safe here?" Eleanor looked at her daughter, 11 years old, asking if they were safe the way other children asked what was for breakfast. A question she had been asking in one form or another since she was 8. Since the first night Edmund came home drunk, and the yelling started, and Hannah learned to listen for footsteps the way animals listen for predators. "I don't know yet, baby, but we're warm, and we're alive, and that's enough for right now." "He stitched your hand." "He did." "Papa would never have done that." The word hit Eleanor in the chest like a stone. Papa. Hannah still called him that sometimes, even now, even after everything. The word was a reflex, a ghost from a time when the children still believed their father was what fathers were supposed to be. "No," Eleanor said. "He wouldn't have." The front door opened and Jesse came in carrying an armload of split wood. He stopped when he saw them standing there. His eyes went to Hannah's knife, then to Eleanor's face. He set the wood beside the stove without comment. "Morning. Coffee's on the porch. I made it before sunup. Might be strong enough to strip paint by now." "I don't drink coffee," Hannah said. "Smart girl. Terrible habit. There's milk in the root cellar if you want it. Goat milk. I've got 2 goats out back who think they own the place." "You have goats?" "Against my will. A neighbor gave them to me 3 years ago and they refused to leave. The brown one is named Jezebel, and she eats everything including my shirts off the clothesline." Hannah did not smile, but something in her face loosened by a fraction. She looked at her mother. Eleanor nodded. Hannah put the knife down on the table, not out of reach, and went to find the root cellar. "She's careful," Jessie said. "She has reason to be." "I know she does. I'm not judging Eleanor. I'm saying she's smart." Lucy appeared from the back room with Boone at her heels. The girl had her hand buried in the dog's fur and was talking to him in a low, steady stream that sounded like she was explaining the entire history of the world. "And then Mama said we had to leave very fast, and we couldn't bring any toys, so I left my doll Elizabeth on the bed, and I think about her every night, because she's all alone in my room, and nobody is talking to her." Boone walked beside her with his head tilted, listening with the grave attention of a creature who understood that being heard was sometimes more important than being answered. "She's been talking to your dog for 10 minutes, Eleanor said. "Boone's a good listener." "She doesn't talk to people like that, not anymore. She used to, before." Jessie poured coffee into a tin cup and held it out to her. She took it. Their fingers did not touch. He had been careful about that. She noticed. "I'm riding into town this morning," Jessie said. "Elk Hollow is 6 miles south. I'll send word to Agnes Whitmore that you're here. She'll want to see you." "I told you, I don't know if she'll remember." "She'll remember. Agnes Whitmore remembers every patient she ever treated, every woman she ever helped, and every man she ever threw out of her clinic for being drunk and useless. If your mother was her friend, she knows your name." Eleanor wrapped both hands around the cup. The warmth stung her stitches, and she held on tighter. "What will you tell people in town?" "The truth, mostly. I found a woman and 3 children stranded in the storm. Brought them to my ranch. She's staying until she's back on her feet. And when people ask why a single woman with 3 children ended up in a blizzard in the middle of Wyoming, people in Elk Hollow don't ask questions they don't want answered. Half the folks in this valley came here running from something. That's how the West works. You don't ask a man his past, and you don't ask a woman her reasons." "That's a nice idea. It doesn't hold up when a detective with a court order shows up asking for me by name." Jessie set his cup down. "If Silas Crane comes to Elk Hollow, he'll have to go through town first. And going through town means going past Hank Morrison's store, past the sheriff's office, past Agnes Whitmore's clinic, and past about 30 people who will know a stranger the second he rides in. This is not Boston, Eleanor. You can't disappear in a crowd here because there is no crowd. But that cuts both ways. Nobody sneaks in either." Eleanor stared into her coffee. The steam rose and faded. "You talk like you've thought about this before. Protecting someone." "I haven't." "Then why are you so calm about it?" Jessie picked up his hat from the table. "Because panic doesn't fix things. I panicked once, at Shiloh, when the line broke and men were running and my brother was on the ground. I panicked, and it cost me time, and time was all he had." He put the hat on. "I don't panic anymore. I just move." He was at the door when Sam's voice came from the back room. Small, barely a whisper. "Boone?" Jessie stopped. Eleanor stopped. They both listened. "Boone, come back." Boone had followed Lucy to the kitchen. The dog turned at the sound of Sam's voice and trotted back to the boy without hesitation. Jessie heard the soft thump of the dog lying down and the rustle of a small body pressing close. "He talks to the dog," Jessie said quietly. "He doesn't talk to anyone else." Eleanor's voice was tight. "Not since the cellar. Edmund locked him in the coal cellar for 4 hours because he cried during dinner. Sam was 3. When I got him out, he screamed for an hour and then went silent. He didn't speak for 2 months. The first word he said was Mama. The second word was stop." Jessie's hand was on the doorframe. His knuckles were white. "I will be back before noon," he said. "The bolt works from the inside. There's a loaded Winchester above the fireplace, and a box of cartridges in the top drawer of the cabinet. Can you shoot? I learned on the road. A woman in Omaha taught me. I can hit what I aim at if it's not moving too fast. Good enough. He stepped onto the porch and then turned back. Eleanor. What? Your girl's knife. The way she holds it, her grip is wrong. She's got her thumb on top of the blade. If she ever has to use it, it'll slide and cut her hand open. Show her to wrap her thumb around the handle, under the guard. Eleanor blinked. You're giving my 11-year-old knife-fighting advice? I'm giving her survival advice. There's a difference. And the way things are, she ought to know. He walked to the barn. Eleanor stood in the doorway and watched him saddle his horse and ride south through the snow. Boone stayed in the house. Jesse did not call for him. He did not even look back. Eleanor closed the door and slid the bolt. She fed the children. The bread was 2 days old, but it was real bread, not the hardtack she had been stretching for a week. There was butter in a crock and salt pork in the cellar, and enough flour to make biscuits if she could manage it one-handed. Hannah helped. Lucy talked to Boone. Sam sat in the corner near the fire and watched everything with those huge brown eyes that trusted nothing. After breakfast, Eleanor cleaned and rewrapped her hand. She examined Jesse's stitching in the daylight and found it clean, even, and tight, better than the fieldwork she had seen from doctors in Boston. She wondered where a rancher had learned to suture like that. And then she remembered what he had said about his brother and Shiloh, and she stopped wondering. She explored the cabin. It was spare, but not bare. There were books on the shelf, real books, not just almanacs. She found Emerson, Whitman, and a battered copy of Moby Dick with notes in the margins written in 2 different hands. One was careful and precise. The other was wilder, messier, the handwriting of a younger person. She opened the front cover. For Jesse, from Daniel. Christmas, 1860. Don't skip the whale parts. Eleanor closed the book and put it back. In the loft, she found a trunk with women's clothes folded inside. Old. A generation old, at least. His mother's things, she guessed. Beside the trunk was a wooden box with a flag folded on top. Union Army. Inside the box, letters. She did not read them. She closed the lid and went back down the ladder. At the bottom, Hannah was waiting. "Mama, there's someone coming." Eleanor's blood went cold. She moved to the window. A rider, coming from the south. 1 horse, 1 person. Not Jesse. This rider was smaller, sitting straight in the saddle, moving with purpose. Eleanor grabbed the Winchester from above the fireplace. She checked the chamber the way the woman in Omaha had shown her. Full. She positioned herself beside the window, out of the direct sight line from outside. "Hannah, take your brother and sister to the back room. Close the door." "Mama!" "Now, Hannah." Hannah grabbed Lucy's hand and scooped Sam off the floor. The boy clung to Boone. Hannah pulled him away, and Boone whined, but stayed where he was, his body tense, ears flat, watching the door. The rider pulled up in the yard, dismounted. Small woman, silver hair, a black medical bag slung over one shoulder. She walked to the door and knocked twice. Hard, impatient. "If you're pointing a gun at this door, put it down. I'm 60 years old. I've been riding since dawn, and I don't have the patience for dramatics." Eleanor did not lower the rifle. "Who are you?" "Agnes Whitmore. I'm a doctor. Jesse Thornton rode into my clinic an hour ago, looking like he'd seen a ghost, and told me Margaret Sullivan's daughter was at his ranch, with 3 children and a bullet wound." "It's a knife wound." Then Jesse exaggerated. He does that when he's worried, which is almost never. So the fact that he did it today tells me something. Now open this door before my knees freeze to your porch. Eleanor lowered the rifle and unbolted the door. Agnes Whitmore walked in like she owned the place. She was small, sharp-featured, with eyes the color of creek stones, and a mouth set in a permanent line that suggested she had given up on foolishness sometime around 1840 and had not looked back. She stopped in the middle of the room and looked at Eleanor. Really looked. The way a doctor looks when she's reading everything at once. The bruise on the jaw that was fading to yellow. The way Eleanor held her left arm close to her body. The hollows under her eyes. The way she stood between the stranger and the room where her children were hiding. "You look like your mother," Agnes said. Eleanor's throat closed. "Margaret Sullivan." 30 years ago, she walked into my practice in Boston with a broken wrist and told me she'd fallen down the stairs. I didn't believe her then, and I don't believe falling down stairs stories now. She came back 6 more times over 2 years. Every time it was stairs. Every time I documented what I actually saw. "You knew?" "I knew, and I couldn't do a damn thing about it, because the law said a husband's business was his own and a wife's injuries were her problem. Your mother died of pneumonia when you were 12, but the pneumonia found her because she had been broken so many times there was nothing left to fight with." Eleanor's vision blurred. She blinked hard, and the tears held. "I wrote you that letter 8 months ago," Agnes continued. "I sent it to the only address I had, your school in Boston. I said if you ever needed a place to disappear, Elk Hollow was far enough from anywhere that God himself would need directions. I got the letter. I read it so many times the paper fell apart. And here you are. Here I am." Agnes set her bag on the table and opened it. "Show me the hand, and then show me the children, and then sit down and eat something because you look like you haven't had a proper meal since September. It's December. Exactly my point." The back door opened and Lucy came out first, Boone behind her. The girl looked at Agnes with open curiosity. "Are you the doctor?" "I am." "Can you fix Mama's hand?" "I can fix most things, given enough time and the good sense of my patients, which is never guaranteed." "Can you fix Sam? He doesn't talk." Agnes looked at Eleanor. Eleanor shook her head slightly. Agnes looked back at Lucy. "Some things take longer to fix than others, sweetheart. But I've been doctoring for 35 years, and I haven't quit on a patient yet." She examined Eleanor's hand first. She unwrapped Jessie's bandage, studied the stitches, and made a sound in her throat that was almost approving. "Jessie did this?" "Yes." Better than I expected. He learned from his father. Ezra Thornton could stitch a wound tighter than a Boston surgeon, and he did it for horses, but the principle is the same. She cleaned the wound, applied a salve that smelled like pine and something bitter, and rewrapped it with proper gauze. "It'll scar, but you'll keep the hand and the fingers will work. You're lucky." "Lucky isn't the word I'd use. It's the word I'm using. You're alive, and your children are alive, and you're sitting in the house of the only man in this territory I would trust with both." "That's luck, Eleanor. Take it." Hannah came out with Sam in her arms. The boy had his face pressed into his sister's shoulder. Agnes looked at him, and her expression changed. The briskness dropped away like a mask falling off. "Hello there," she said softly. "What's your name?" Sam did not answer. He turned his face deeper into Hannah's neck. "His name is Sam," Hannah said. "He doesn't talk to strangers. He doesn't talk to most people. He talks to the dog." Agnes knelt down. She did not reach for the boy. She did not move closer. She just knelt there, at his level, and waited. "Sam, my name is Agnes. I'm a friend of your grandmother's. I'm going to be around for a while, so there's no rush. Whenever you're ready." Sam did not respond, but Boone walked over and sat beside Agnes, and the dog's tail wagged once, slow and deliberate, like a recommendation. Sam peeked, one brown eye, looking at Boone sitting next to this stranger. The dog's tail wagged again. Sam looked at Agnes. He did not speak, but he did not hide his face again, either. Agnes counted that as progress and stood up. She pulled Eleanor aside while the children settled by the fire. "I'm going to be direct with you because I don't have the energy for anything else. That boy has been hurt in ways that don't leave marks you can see. He'll need time and patience and a world that doesn't grab at him. The older girl is carrying weight no child should carry. She's mothering those two because someone had to, and it shouldn't have been her. And the little one, Lucy, she's the brightest light in this family, and she knows it, and she's terrified of it, because being noticed was dangerous in your house." Eleanor pressed her back against the wall. "I know all of this. I know you know. I'm saying it out loud because you need to hear someone else say it. You've been carrying this alone for too long, Eleanor." "I'm not alone. You've got yourself and your stubbornness and an empty revolver. That's not enough anymore." Agnes gripped her arm. "I'm here now. Jesse is here. This town is here. Let us in." "Letting people in is how I got hurt." "Letting one man in is how you got hurt. That's not the same thing, and you know it." Eleanor looked at the fire, at Hannah, sitting with her back straight and her knife on the floor beside her, at Lucy, whispering to Boone, at Sam, curled in the corner, watching the flames with eyes that saw things no 5-year-old should have stored behind them. "Edmund filed papers," she said. "A court order claiming I abducted the children. He hired a man named Silas Crane to find us and bring us back." "I know. Jesse told me." "Those papers are legal, Agnes. A judge signed them. In Massachusetts, a father has absolute custody. I have no rights. If Crane finds us and presents those papers to any sheriff in any territory, they are legally obligated to hand my children over." "Maybe in Massachusetts. This is Wyoming. The law doesn't stop at state lines." "No, but enforcement does. And I know the sheriff in El Calo. Will Davenport is a man who reads every piece of paper put in front of him and asks questions about the ones that smell wrong. A custody order from Boston for a woman who showed up beaten and bleeding in the middle of winter is going to smell very wrong. You don't know Edmund. He plans everything. He covers every angle. He's a lawyer, Agnes. He builds cases the way other men build houses, brick by brick, until there's no door you can walk through." "Then we build our own door." Agnes picked up her bag. "I'll document everything. Every scar, every healed fracture, every mark on those children that tells the real story. I've been writing medical reports that judges couldn't ignore for 35 years. By the time I'm done, Edmund Hale's custody papers won't be worth the ink they're printed on." She buttoned her coat. "I'll be back tomorrow. Keep that hand clean and dry. Make Jesse do the heavy lifting. And Eleanor." "What?" "Eat. You're too thin and your children are watching you skip meals. They notice. Children always notice." Agnes rode out. Eleanor bolted the door and stood with her forehead pressed against the wood, breathing. Hannah's voice came from behind her. "Mama, I like her. She's bossy. She reminds me of you." Eleanor turned around. Her daughter was standing by the fire, and for 1 second, just one, the girl looked like what she was. 11. Just 11. "Come here, baby." Hannah crossed the room, and Eleanor wrapped her good arm around her and held on. Hannah pressed her face into her mother's shoulder, and her body shook once, hard, and then went still. "Is it over, Mama? Are we done running?" Eleanor closed her eyes. She wanted to say yes. She wanted to say it so badly that the words sat on her tongue like a hot coal. But she had promised herself 6 weeks ago, the night she stole her children from their beds and walked into the dark, that she would never lie to them again, not even to make them feel safe, because false safety was what Edmund had sold her for 10 years, and she would die before she became a different version of the same lie. "I don't know yet," she said, "but we're closer than we've ever been." Jessie returned before noon with supplies: flour, salt, coffee, a sack of dried beans, and a brown paper package that he handed directly to Lucy. "What is it?" Lucy asked. "Open it." She tore the paper. Inside was a rag doll with yellow yarn hair and a blue calico dress. It was handmade, slightly lopsided, clearly sewn by someone who was better at stitching wounds than toys. Lucy held it up and stared at it. "It ain't fancy," Jessie said. "Mrs. Morrison at the general store makes them. I told her there was a girl at my ranch who'd left her doll behind, and she had this one ready in 20 minutes. Lucy looked at the doll. She looked at Jessie. Her lower lip trembled. "Her name is Elizabeth," Lucy said. "Same as my other one." "That's a fine name." Lucy clutched the doll to her chest and walked away without another word. She sat down next to Boone and held the doll in one hand and the dog's fur in the other. And she was quiet for the first time all morning. Eleanor stood by the stove and watched her daughter hold a doll that a stranger had bought her because another stranger had listened to a 7-year-old talk to a dog about the toy she'd left behind. She looked at Jessie. He was unpacking the supplies, his back to her, acting like he had not just cracked her daughter's heart wide open with a $2 rag doll. "Jessie." "Yeah?" "Thank you." He did not turn around. "It's just a doll." "No, it isn't." He stopped unpacking. His hands went flat on the table. He stood there for a moment with his back to her, and Eleanor saw his shoulders rise once with a breath he held longer than he needed to. "No," he said quietly. "I guess it isn't." That evening, after the children were asleep, Eleanor sat on the porch in the cold and watched the stars burn above the mountains. The sky was so wide it made her chest ache. In Boston, you could go your whole life without seeing the sky. Here, the sky was everything. It pressed down on you and held you up at the same time. Jessie came out of the barn. He saw her on the porch and stopped. "You should be inside. That hand. My hand is fine. Sit down." He sat, 3 feet away. She noticed the distance. She noticed that he always kept it. "Agnes says you're the most decent man in the territory." "Agnes says a lot of things." "She says you've been alone out here for 8 years, and you've never once let anyone close enough to matter. Agnes should mind her own business." "She says you have nightmares." Jessie went still. Not tense. Still. The way water goes still right before it freezes. "I heard you last night," Eleanor said. "In the barn. Through the wall. You were saying a name. Daniel." "That's not your concern." "You're right. It's not." She pulled the blanket tighter around her shoulders. "I'm just saying. You know my scars now. Seems only fair I know yours." "It's not the same thing." "Isn't it? 2 people carrying things they can't put down? Seems pretty similar from where I'm sitting." Jessie took off his hat and turned it in his hands. The starlight caught the lines on his face, the scar on his jaw, the way his eyes looked older than his years. "Daniel was my kid brother," he said. 16 when he enlisted. I told him not to. I told him the war wasn't what he thought it was. He signed up anyway because he thought I was a hero, and he wanted to be one too. He stopped turning the hat. Shiloh. April, 62. The line broke on the second day. Daniel took a ball in the gut. I found him in the mud calling my name. I held him for 2 hours while he bled out. He asked me to tell our mother he was brave. Was he? He was 16, and he was gut shot, and he was crying for his mama. But he didn't let go of my hand. Not once. So yeah, he was brave in the only way that matters. Eleanor did not speak. She sat with him in the cold and the silence, and she let the silence be enough. She had learned that from the worst years of her marriage, that sometimes the kindest thing you can do for someone in pain is to stop trying to fix it and just sit there. Jesse put his hat back on. You asked me yesterday why I'm doing this, taking you in, risking trouble. You said you hadn't found the edge of what you're capable of. That was the brave answer. The true answer is simpler. I couldn't save Daniel. I was right there, holding him, and I couldn't stop the bleeding. I've lived with that for 14 years. I wake up with it. I go to sleep with it. It's the first thing I think about in the morning and the last thing I see at night. He looked at her. When I carried your boy through that storm, he grabbed my coat, and I thought, this is what it feels like to hold someone small and have them live. That's why, Eleanor. That's the whole reason. Eleanor's eyes burned. She blinked, and the tears fell, and she did not wipe them away, because she was tired of pretending things didn't hurt. We're a mess, she said. Yes, ma'am. Both of us. Broken in different places, but broken all the same. I reckon that's true. And you're still sitting out here 3 feet away from me like I'm going to bite you. I'm sitting 3 feet away because you need 3 feet. And I'll sit here at 3 feet for as long as you need me to. Eleanor looked at him across the dark space between them. This quiet, scarred, stubborn man, who slept in his own barn so she could bolt the door, who bought her daughter a doll and pretended it was nothing, who told her the worst thing that ever happened to him, because she asked, and who sat 3 feet away because she needed him to. Jesse? Yeah? Don't go anywhere. I'm not going anywhere. I mean it. So do I. Boone pushed through the barn door and crossed the yard and lay down across both their boots, connecting them with the warm weight of his body, the way he had done with the children, the way he did with everything he decided belonged together. Eleanor reached down and put her hand on the dog's head. Jesse did the same. Their fingers did not touch, but they were close. Closer than 3 feet. And for now, with the stars burning cold above Wyoming, and the snow glowing blue in the dark, and 3 children sleeping safe inside a house with a bolt on the door, it was close enough. 3 days passed, and the ranch found a rhythm that none of them had asked for, but all of them needed. Eleanor's hand healed fast. Agnes came every morning, changed the bandage, checked the stitches, and left with instructions that Eleanor ignored half of, and Jesse enforced the other half. Hannah started eating breakfast without being told. Lucy talked to Boone from sunup to sundown, a running monologue about everything and nothing that the dog absorbed with the patience of a creature who understood that silence had been this child's enemy for too long. And Sam, who had not spoken a word to anyone but the dog since they arrived, walked to the barn on the 3rd morning and stood in the doorway, watching Jesse work. Jesse was mending a harness. He saw the boy in the corner of his eye and kept working. He did not speak. He did not look up. He just let Sam stand there and watch, the way you let a wild animal come to water on its own time. 10 minutes passed. 20. Jesse's hands moved steady over the leather, threading, pulling, knotting. Sam took 1 step into the barn, then another. He sat down on a hay bale 6 feet from Jesse and pulled his knees to his chest. Jesse reached into the box beside him and pulled out a piece of scrap leather and a blunt needle. He set them on the hay bale next to Sam without a word and went back to his work. Sam looked at the leather. He looked at the needle. He picked them up. His small hands tried to push the needle through the leather the way he had watched Jesse do it. It took him 4 tries. On the 5th, the needle went through. Sam pulled the thread and looked up at Jesse with an expression that was not a smile, but was closer to one than anything Eleanor had seen on his face in 6 weeks. Jesse nodded once. "Good. Now do it again." Eleanor watched from the barn door. She pressed her hand over her mouth and turned away before either of them could see her face. On the 4th morning, the rhythm broke. Jesse had ridden into Elk Hollow for supplies. Eleanor was in the kitchen, showing Hannah how to make biscuits with one hand, when Boone stood up from his spot beside Sam and went rigid. Every muscle in the dog's body locked. His ears flattened. A growl started low in his chest, building like thunder coming over a ridge. Eleanor's hand stopped in the flour. She looked at the dog. "Hannah, take Sam and Lucy to the back room." "Mama!" "Now!" Hannah grabbed her brother and sister and moved. She did not ask why. She had learned years ago that when her mother's voice changed like that, you moved first and asked later. Eleanor wiped her hands, took the Winchester from above the fireplace, and went to the window. A rider was coming up the road from the south. Tall, thin, sitting straight in the saddle with a long duster coat that hung past his stirrups. Moving slow, not hurrying. The pace of a man who had already found what he was looking for and saw no reason to rush. Boone's growl deepened. The fur on his spine stood up in a line from his neck to his tail. Eleanor checked the Winchester. Full magazine. She positioned herself beside the door, out of the sight line from outside, the way Jesse had shown her, without actually showing her, just by always doing it himself until she copied the habit. The rider stopped in the yard. He did not dismount. He sat in the saddle and looked at the house, the barn, the fence line, the road behind him, taking inventory, reading the land the way a hunter reads tracks. "Mrs. Hale," he called out. His voice was calm, pleasant, the voice of a man who sells something you do not want to buy. "My name is Silas Crane. I've been hired by your husband to locate you and your children." Eleanor's finger found the trigger. "I'm not armed, Mrs. Hale. I'm a detective, not a gunfighter. I've been tracking you since Chicago, and I'd very much like to have a conversation." "There's nothing to talk about." "I think there is. I have papers from a Massachusetts court. Custody order, signed by Judge Warren Pierce. Your husband has the legal right to— My husband has the legal right to nothing. The court disagrees, ma'am. The court has never seen what that man does to his children." Crane was quiet for a moment. His horse shifted under him. "I'm not here to argue law with you, Mrs. Hale. I'm here to tell you that I've found you, and that means Mr. Hale will know where you are within the week. What happens after that is between you and him, and whatever sheriff runs this territory. I'm just the messenger. Then deliver your message and leave. I have one more thing to say, and then I'll go." Eleanor waited. Boone was at the door now, his growl constant, his body between Eleanor and the threshold. "I've been doing this work for 12 years, Crane said. I've tracked runaway wives, runaway debtors, runaway sons. Most of the time, the story is simple. Someone owes someone something, and they ran instead of paying. But every now and then, I track someone, and when I find them, I see something that doesn't match what I was told." He paused. "I was told you were an unstable woman who stole children from a loving father. I was told you were dangerous. But I've been watching this ranch for 2 days, Mrs. Hale, and what I see is a woman whose children run to her, not from her, and a boy who won't let go of a dog because the dog is the first thing he's trusted in, longer than a 5-year-old should know about. Eleanor's grip on the rifle shifted. "I'm going to ride into town," Crane said. "I'm going to send a telegram to Mr. Hale, confirming your location. That's what I'm paid to do, and I'll do it. But I want you to know that I'm not going to help him take those children. Finding is my job. Taking is not." He turned his horse. At the edge of the yard, he stopped.
"For what it's worth, ma'am, the boy in Omaha who saw you practice shooting said you pulled left on every third shot. Might want to work on that." He rode south toward town. Eleanor stood at the window and watched him go. Her hands were shaking, not from fear, from the effort of not pulling the trigger on a man who had just told her that her husband was coming. Boone pressed against her leg. She put her hand on his head and held on. 15 minutes later, Jesse came up the road at a gallop. He had seen Crane riding into Elk Hollow. He had seen the duster coat and the tall frame, and he had turned Bonnie around so fast the mare nearly threw him. He came through the door breathing hard, his hand on his holster. "Eleanor." "I'm fine. The children are in the back." "I saw a rider." "Silas Crane." Jesse's jaw locked. "What did he say?" "He said he's sending a telegram to Edmund. He knows where I am. He said Edmund will know within the week." "Did he threaten you?" "No, he told me my shooting pulls left, and he said he wouldn't help Edmund take the children." Jesse stared at her. "You believe him?" "I believe he's a man who does his job and doesn't ask questions he doesn't want answered." But he saw Sam with Boone, and something in his face changed. I think he expected to find a crazy woman, and instead he found what he actually found. "That doesn't mean he won't hand Hale every piece of information he needs to come here and take them legally." "I know." Jesse pulled off his hat and ran his hand through his hair. "How long?" "A week, maybe less. The telegram goes today. Boston to Cheyenne by rail is 4 days. Cheyenne to here, another 2. 6 days. 6 days. Jesse sat down at the table. He put his hands flat on the wood and stared at them. "All right, here's what we do. I'm going to talk to Will Davenport. Tell him what's coming. Then I'm going to Agnes. Then I'm going to Hank Morrison and every rancher within 10 miles. "Jesse, this isn't their fight." "The hell it isn't. A man coming to this valley to drag a woman and 3 children back to a house where he breaks arms and locks kids in cellars? That's everybody's fight. You can't ask these people to—" "I'm not asking. I'm telling them. And they'll show up because that's what people in this valley do. They showed up when the Dawson Ranch burned. They showed up when the river flooded Miller's farm. They show up because showing up is what makes this a community and not just a collection of strangers living near each other." Eleanor pressed her back against the wall. "Edmund will come with papers, Jesse. Legal papers. A judge's seal. He'll have the law on his side." "Then we'll have the truth on ours." He stood up and went to the door. "Lock this behind me. I'll be back before dark." He rode to Elk Hollow in 30 minutes. He went to the sheriff's office first. Will Davenport was cleaning his pistol at his desk, a ritual he performed every Thursday with the devotion of a man who believed that preparedness was a form of prayer. He was 44, lean, sunburned, with a mustache that had gone gray 10 years before the rest of him, and eyes that could read a lie the way a preacher reads scripture. "Jesse Thornton, twice in 1 week. Must be trouble. There's a man coming, a lawyer from Boston named Edmund Hale. He's got a custody order for 3 children staying at my ranch. Their mother brought them here because their father beat them." Will set down the pistol. "The woman Agnes told me about." "Yes. And this Hale, he's got legal papers?" "From a Massachusetts court. Custody order giving him full rights to the children." "Massachusetts law or territorial law?" "Massachusetts.
I don't know if it holds here. It holds if a federal marshal enforces it. It holds if the papers are legitimate and nobody challenges them.
Will leaned back. But challenging takes time, and time is what we need. Tell me about the children. Jesse told him. He told him about Hannah's arm, about Sam in the coal cellar, about Lucy and the doll and the dog. He told him about Eleanor walking through a blizzard with a bleeding hand and an empty gun and 3 children she would die for. Will listened without interrupting. When Jesse finished, the sheriff was quiet for a long time. I can't refuse a court order, Jesse. If Hale shows up with legitimate papers and a federal marshal, I am bound by law to cooperate. But I can delay. I can demand verification. I can require that the papers be reviewed by a territorial judge before they're enforced. That buys time. How much? Days, maybe a week. After that, it's out of my hands unless someone gives me a legal reason to challenge the order. Agnes is documenting everything. Medical records of the abuse. Good. Medical testimony from a licensed physician carries weight, especially if the children show signs consistent with what the mother describes. Will picked up his pistol again. I'll need to see the children myself. Official record. My testimony that I observed them, their condition, their behavior. If this goes to a territorial hearing, I want my name on a report that says those kids are scared of their father, not their mother. When can you come? Tomorrow morning. Jesse nodded and stood. One more thing. There's a man in town, Silas Crane. Tall, duster coat, rides a gray horse. I know. He's been at the boarding house for 2 days, asking questions. Quiet about it, but Clarabeth told me he's been buying drinks at the saloon and talking to anyone who will listen. He found Eleanor this morning, rode up to the ranch. Will's eyes hardened. He went to your property? Told Eleanor he was sending a telegram to Hale. Did he threaten her? Not directly, but the message was clear. Hale knows where she is now. Will stood. He buckled his gun belt with the deliberate care of a man who intended to use it only if he had to, but was fully prepared to use it if he did. I'll have a conversation with Mr. Crane this afternoon. Nothing hostile. Just a reminder that this is my town, and I keep track of who comes and goes and why. Jesse left the sheriff and went to Agnes. She was in her clinic stitching a cut on a miner's forehead and swearing at him for not wearing a helmet. When she saw Jesse's face, she sent the miner away half-bandaged and shut the door. Crane found her, Jesse said. Agnes sat down hard in her chair. How long do we have? 6 days. That's not enough. I need at least 2 weeks to build a proper medical case. I've documented Eleanor's injuries, but I haven't finished examining the children. Hannah's arm needs to be x-rayed, and I don't have the equipment. I'd have to send it to Cheyenne. There's no time for Cheyenne. Then I work with what I have. I can document the healed fracture by palpation. I can record Sam's selective mutism and Lucy's behavioral patterns. I can write an affidavit that describes everything I've observed and everything Eleanor has told me. Will that hold against a judge's seal? On its own, maybe not. But it creates doubt, and doubt is all we need to slow this down. Agnes pulled a leather journal from her desk. There's something else. I sent a letter to a colleague in Boston 3 days ago. A doctor named Thomas Marsh. He treated Hannah's arm when Edmund claimed she fell downstairs. Will he talk? Thomas Marsh has been carrying guilt about that broken arm for a year. He told me once, before I left Boston, that he knew those injuries weren't from a fall. He knew, and he said nothing, because Edmund Hale was powerful, and Thomas Marsh was afraid. Being afraid doesn't help us. No, but guilt does. I wrote Thomas and told him that the child whose arm he set is now living in a cabin in Wyoming,
because her mother had to steal her own children to keep them alive. I asked him to write a sworn statement about what he actually saw that day. If he does, that statement combined with my medical records creates a pattern that no honest judge can ignore. And if he doesn't, then we fight with what we have, which is still more than Edmund Hale expects. Jesse went to Hank Morrison's store next. Hank was behind the counter, sorting nails into bins, with the focused intensity of a man who believed that disorganized hardware was a sign of moral failing. "Hank, I need to talk to you." "If it's about the goats, I told you I'm not taking Jezebel back. She's your problem now." "It's not about the goats." Hank looked up. He saw Jesse's face and set down the nails. "Sit down." Jesse told him. "Not everything. Enough. A woman and 3 children. A man coming to take them. A fight that was heading for Elk Hollow, whether they wanted it or not." Hank listened the way he listened to everything, with his hands still, his eyes steady, and his mouth shut until the talking was done. "What do you need?" Hank asked. "I need people who will stand up when the time comes. Not to fight, just to stand. To be present. To show this man that he's not walking into an empty valley where he can do whatever he wants." "You're asking me to go against a court order." "I'm asking you to stand in the street and be counted." Hank was quiet for a long time. Then he reached under the counter and pulled out a shotgun that was older than Jesse and twice as stubborn. "My Martha, God rest her. She had a sister in Philadelphia. Husband used to knock her around every Saturday after he'd been drinking. Martha begged her to leave, begged her for years. The sister always said she couldn't, said the law was on his side, said nobody would help her. She died in that house, Jesse. Fell down the stairs. That's what the coroner wrote. Fell down the stairs." He set the shotgun on the counter. "Nobody in this valley is falling down any stairs. You tell me when." Jesse rode to every ranch within 10 miles. He told the same story each time. Plain, simple, true. And each time, the answer was the same. Not the same words, but the same meaning. A nod. A handshake. A rifle taken down from a wall. Frank Dawson said, "I've got 3 sons who can ride. We'll be there." The Miller brothers said, "Just tell us the day." Old Pete Garza, who had been ranching the North Valley since before the war, stood on his porch and listened, and then said something in Spanish that Jesse did not fully understand, but that ended with the word familia, and that was enough. By nightfall, Jesse had 14 men and 6 women committed. Not to fight, to stand. To fill a street and show a man from Boston that this valley was not empty, and this woman was not alone. He rode home in the dark. Eleanor was on the porch. She had a blanket around her shoulders and the Winchester across her knees, and Boone at her feet. The children were asleep inside. "Well," she said. Jesse dismounted and tied the horse. He climbed the porch steps and sat down beside her. Closer than 3 feet this time. He did not plan it. His body just went where it went. "Will Davenport is coming tomorrow to see the children. Agnes is building a medical case. Hank Morrison is spreading the word, and every rancher between here and the North Ridge will be in Elk Hollow when Hale arrives." Eleanor was quiet. "You did all that in one afternoon." "I ride fast." "You shouldn't have done it." "Probably not." "These people don't know me. They don't owe me anything." "They don't owe you a thing. That's why it matters. They're not doing it because they have to. They're doing it because a man beating his children and hunting his wife across 1,000 miles is wrong. And people around here still know the difference between wrong and legal." Eleanor turned her face away. Jesse heard her breathing change, and he knew she was fighting something she did not want him to see. "The last time someone helped me was the woman in Omaha who taught me to shoot," she said. "She was a widow who ran a boarding house. She gave me 3 days of meals and 2 hours of target practice, and she asked for nothing. When I left, she pressed $5 into my hand and said, 'Don't you dare thank me. Just keep those babies alive.' I cried for 10 miles after I left her house. Sounds like a good woman. She was the only person in 6 weeks who treated me like a human being instead of a problem." Jesse reached over and took the rifle from her lap, not grabbing, asking with his hands. She let him take it. He leaned it against the wall, and then he did something he had not done before. He put his hand on the porch railing between them, palm up, open, an offering.
Not a demand. Eleanor looked at his hand. She looked at his face. "You're getting closer than 3 feet," she said. "I reckon I am." "I didn't say you could." "I know. That's why my hand is on the railing and not on you." She stared at him. This impossible man. This patient, quiet, stubborn man who slept in his barn and bought dolls for her daughter and taught her son to push a needle through leather and rode to every ranch in the valley to ask strangers to stand up for a woman they had never met. She put her hand in his. His fingers closed around hers, warm, steady, calloused from 8 years of rope and leather and wood. He did not squeeze, he did not pull. He just held on and let her decide how tight. She decided tight. She held on like his hand was the only solid thing left in a world that had been trying to pull her under for 10 years. Boone lifted his head. He looked at their hands joined on the railing. His tail thumped once against the porch boards, and he laid his chin on Eleanor's boot and closed his eyes. 6 days, Eleanor said. 6 days. He'll bring lawyers, papers, maybe a marshal. And I'll have 14 ranchers, a doctor with 35 years of medical records, a sheriff who reads every piece of paper twice, and a dog who bites people he doesn't like. Jesse. Yeah. If this goes wrong, if he takes them, if the law sides with him and there's nothing we can do, I need you to promise me something. Name it. Don't let me disappear. Don't let him put me somewhere and erase me the way he erased Catherine Marsh, the woman his first wife told me about, the one who ended up in an institution because she fought back. If he takes my children and comes for me, I need someone to know I existed. I need someone to remember. Jessie turned to face her. The starlight was in her eyes, turning the gray-blue to silver. She was not crying. She was past crying. She was in the place beyond tears, where the only thing left is the cold, clear knowledge of what you might lose. Eleanor Sullivan, he said, I am not going to let that man take your children. I am not going to let him erase you. And I am not going to let you disappear. Not tomorrow. Not in 6 days. Not ever. Because my dog chose you, and my dog has never been wrong, and I have spent 8 years trusting that animal with my life, and I am not about to stop now. She laughed. It came out broken, half sob, half sound, and she pressed her forehead against his shoulder because she could not hold herself up anymore, and he was solid, and he was there. Jesse put his arm around her, careful, light, giving her every chance to pull away. She did not pull away. She leaned in and let him hold the weight she had been carrying alone across 1,000 miles of empty country. We're going to win this, he said into her hair. You don't know that. No, but Boone does, and that's always been good enough for me. The dog's tail thumped again in the dark. The stars burned cold above Wyoming, And somewhere to the east, on a train that was already moving, a man with polished shoes and a leather briefcase full of papers signed by a judge sat in a private car and watched the country roll past and thought about property. He was coming, and he believed he had already won. He was wrong about that, but he did not know it yet. Edmund Hale arrived on the 5th day, not the 6th. He came in a hired coach from Cheyenne, with a federal marshal named Colton Pierce riding escort, and Silas Crane waiting at the edge of town to meet them. The coach was black and polished, and looked as wrong on the dirt street of Elk Hollow as a top hat on a mule. 2 additional men rode behind it, hired guards with rifles across their saddles, and the blank faces of men who were paid not to think. Eleanor was at Agnes's clinic when she heard the wheels. She was wrapping a bandage on a rancher's son who had cut his hand on barbed wire. Her fingers stopped. The gauze went slack. She did not need to look out the window. She knew the sound of Edmund's arrival the way an animal knows the sound of a trap closing. "Eleanor!" Agnes was beside her. "Breathe." "I am breathing." "You're not. Your hand stopped." Eleanor looked down at the half-wrapped bandage. She finished the knot, patted the boy's arm, and stood up. She went to the window. The coach had stopped in front of the sheriff's office. Edmund stepped out. She had not seen him in 7 weeks, but her body recognized him before her eyes did. The way he stood, the slight tilt of his head when he surveyed a room, or a street, or a person he intended to own. The way his hands hung at his sides, relaxed, controlled. The hands of a man who had never needed to raise his voice, because the threat of what those hands could do was always louder than any shout. He looked exactly the same. That was the worst part. He looked like the man she had married. Handsome, composed. The kind of face that made other women tell her how lucky she was. Marshal Pierce dismounted and walked into the sheriff's office. Edmund stayed outside. He looked up and down the street with an expression Eleanor knew by heart. Evaluation. Assessment. The quiet cataloging of a man who measured everything by what it was worth to him and discarded what wasn't. His eyes found the clinic window. He could not see her through the glass, she knew that. The light was wrong. But his eyes stopped on that window and stayed, and Eleanor felt the old terror rise in her throat like bile. "He knows I'm here," she said. "Of course he knows. Crane told him. But knowing and taking are 2 different things." Agnes gripped her arm. "You are not the woman who left Boston. You are not the woman he broke. You are the woman who walked through a blizzard with 3 children and an empty gun and did not stop. Remember that." "I remember everything, Agnes. That's the problem." The clinic door opened. Jesse walked in. He had been at the general store with Hank when the coach rolled in. His face was tight, but his voice was even. "He's here. Marshal Pierce is inside with Will right now. They're presenting the papers." "How long before they come for me?" "Will said he'd review every document and demand verification. That buys us hours, not days." "Hours isn't enough." "It's what we have." Agnes pulled a leather folder from her desk. "It's what we have plus this. My medical affidavit. 12 pages. Every injury I observed on Eleanor, every scar, every healed fracture on Hannah. Sam's behavioral assessment, Lucy's trauma responses. I signed it this morning. Notarized by Hank Morrison, who is the closest thing this town has to a public notary." "Will that stop a federal marshal?" Jesse asked. "It won't stop him, but it gives Will legal grounds to request a territorial hearing before enforcing the custody order. A hearing means a judge. A judge means testimony. Testimony means Eleanor gets to tell her side." "When?" "That's the problem. A territorial judge has to come from Cheyenne.
That takes days. Will can request a delay, but the marshal isn't obligated to grant one. Jesse looked at Eleanor. What do you want to do? Eleanor's hands were pressed flat against the examination table. She could feel the grain of the wood under her palms. Solid. Real. She focused on that. Where are my children? At the ranch. Hannah has the Winchester. Boone is with them. You left my children with a rifle and a dog. I left your children with an 11-year-old who knows how to use both. And Frank Dawson's oldest boy is sitting on your porch with a shotgun in case anyone rides up that road. Eleanor closed her eyes. I want to see him. Eleanor, I want to see Edmund.
I want to walk into that sheriff's office, and I want to look him in the face, and I want him to see what I am now. That's exactly what he wants. He wants you in that room. He wants to perform for the marshal, the loving husband, the worried father. I know his performance. I lived inside it for 10 years. And that's exactly why I have to be there. Because the only person in the world who can show that marshal what Victor Hale really is the woman he did it to. Agnes and Jesse looked at each other. Something passed between them. Not agreement. Resignation. The shared understanding of two people who had learned that Eleanor Sullivan did not change course once her jaw was set. Then we go together, Agnes said. All three of us. And I bring this. She held up the leather folder. They crossed the street. Eleanor walked in the middle, Agnes on her left, Jesse on her right. She did not look at the coach. She did not look at Crane, who was standing beside the livery, watching with his arms crossed. She looked at the sheriff's office door, and she walked toward it the way she had walked through the blizzard. One step at a time. No stopping. Jesse reached the door first. He opened it and stepped aside. Eleanor walked in. Edmund was seated in a chair in front of Will Davenport's desk. Marshal Pierce stood by the window with his arms folded. A tall man with a thick mustache and the impassive face of someone who enforced law without editorializing about it. On the desk, spread in a neat row, were 3 documents: the custody order, a writ of recovery, and a letter from a Massachusetts judge declaring Eleanor Sullivan Hale an unfit mother and a fugitive from lawful custody. Edmund turned in his chair. The mask went on. Eleanor watched it happen, the way she had watched it 1,000 times. The softening of the mouth, the slight crease of concern between the brows, the eyes going warm and wet with manufactured worry. It was flawless. It was always flawless. Edmund Hale could make you believe he loved you while his hand was on your throat. "Eleanor," he said, "thank God." He stood. He moved toward her. His arms came up. "Don't touch me." He stopped. His arms stayed open. His face held the concern, but behind his eyes something flickered. Cold. Fast. The real thing showing through the paint. "Darling, you look exhausted. What you've been through, taking the children into this wilderness, in winter, alone? I've been sick with worry." "You've been sick with nothing. Sit down, Edmund." Marshal Pierce straightened. "Ma'am, Mr. Hale has presented legal documents granting him custody of 3 minor children. I'm here to ensure those documents are enforced in an orderly manner." "Have you read them?" Eleanor asked. "I have." "Have you read this?" Agnes stepped forward and placed her leather folder on Will's desk beside Edmund's papers. Medical affidavit, 12 pages, documenting injuries sustained by Mrs. Hale and her children over a period of approximately 10 years, including a fractured radius in the right arm of an 11-year-old girl, consistent with a twisting force applied by an adult hand. The room went quiet.
Marshal Pierce looked at the folder. Edmund's jaw tightened by 1 degree. "My daughter fell," Edmund said. His voice was steady, patient, the voice of a man explaining something obvious to someone slow. "She fell on the stairs. I've told the doctor in Boston the same thing. Children fall. It's unfortunate, but it's not criminal." "Children fall," Agnes said, "but they don't fall in a spiral fracture pattern consistent with rotational force applied to the forearm. That's not a fall, Mr. Hale. That's a grab and a twist. I've been practicing medicine for 35 years and I know the difference." "And who are you?" "Dr. Agnes Whitmore, licensed physician. 20 years in Boston, 15 in Wyoming Territory. I treated this woman's mother for injuries she also claimed came from falling down stairs. Like mother, like daughter, it seems. Except the stairs are always in houses owned by men." Edmund turned to Will. "Sheriff, I don't know who this woman is, but I came here with legitimate papers signed by a sitting judge. I have the legal right to my children. I have a federal marshal to enforce that right. I did not come here to be accused of crimes by a country doctor who has never met me." Will Davenport had not moved from behind his desk. He had been reading Agnes's affidavit while they spoke, turning pages slowly, his face giving nothing away. Now he set it down and looked at Edmund. "Mr. Hale, I've read your papers, and I've read this affidavit. Your papers say one thing. This affidavit says another. In my experience, when 2 sets of documents disagree, the truth is usually hiding somewhere in between."
There is no between, Sheriff. I have a court order. You have a court order from Massachusetts. This is Wyoming Territory. I'm going to request a territorial hearing before any children are removed from my jurisdiction.
"That's not your call," Marshal Pierce said. "It is my call, if I have reasonable cause to believe the children may be in danger, and this medical affidavit gives me reasonable cause." "That affidavit is from a small-town doctor who's been told one side of the story," Edmund said. His voice was still calm, but the edges were sharpening. "My wife is disturbed. She has been unstable for years. She stole my children from their beds in the middle of the night. She dragged them across the country in winter without adequate clothing or food. My son has stopped speaking because of the trauma she's inflicted. These are not the actions of a fit mother."
Your son stopped speaking, Eleanor said, because you locked him in a coal cellar for 4 hours when he was 3 years old.
The room tilted. Marshal Pierce's arms unfolded. Will Davenport's eyes went from Eleanor to Edmund and stayed there. Edmund's mask held. But something behind it was working, something calculating its speed. "Eleanor, darling, this is exactly what I was afraid of. These episodes, these accusations. The doctor in Boston can confirm." "Dr. Thomas Marsh?" Agnes said. "The physician who treated Hannah's arm?" Edmund went still. "I wrote to Dr. Marsh last week," Agnes continued. "He replied by wire 2 days ago." She pulled a folded telegram from the leather folder and placed it on Will's desk. "Dr. Marsh states that the fracture he treated in Hannah Hale's right arm was inconsistent with a fall. He states that he observed bruising on the child's upper arm in the pattern of adult fingers. He states that he did not report his findings because he was afraid of professional retaliation from Mr. Hale. He is willing to repeat these statements under oath in a territorial hearing." Edmund stood. The chair scraped the floor. The sound was sharp and sudden, and Eleanor flinched. She hated that she flinched. She hated that after everything, after 6 weeks of running and fighting and surviving, her body still reacted to him like a hand recoiling from a flame. Jessie stepped forward. 1 step. Not aggressive, just present. Filling the space between Edmund and Eleanor the way a wall fills a doorway. "Mr. Hale," Will said, "sit down." "I will not sit down," I came here with the full authority of the law, and I will not stand in this office and be ambushed by forged telegrams and paid accusations." "Nobody is being paid," Agnes said, "and that telegram can be verified with one wire to Boston." "This is absurd. Marshal Pierce, I want those children recovered immediately." Pierce looked at Will. Will looked at Pierce. Two lawmen measuring each other across a desk full of papers that told two different stories. "I'm going to request a continuance," Will said. 48 hours. That's enough time to verify Dr. Marsh's statement and schedule a territorial hearing." 48 hours is unacceptable," Edmund said. "It's what I'm granting." "You don't have the authority." "I have the authority to protect the welfare of children in my jurisdiction, Mr. Hale. And right now, I have a medical affidavit and a physician's telegram that raise serious questions about their welfare in your custody." 48 hours. You can wait at the boarding house. Your men can wait at the saloon. Nobody goes near that ranch until this is resolved. Edmund's composure cracked. Not much. A fracture, like a line running through ice. His eyes went to Eleanor, and in that look, she saw everything the mask was built to hide. Not love, not concern. Rage. The focused, white-hot fury of a man who had controlled everything in his life for 20 years and was watching control slip through his fingers in a one-room sheriff's office in a town he could not even find on a map. "You think this changes anything?" he said. His voice was low now. Quiet. The quiet was worse than the shouting. Eleanor knew that quiet. It was the sound Edmund made before the worst nights. "You think a country sheriff and a small-town doctor and some rancher can stop what's coming? I have lawyers in Boston who will bury this territory in paper. I have judges who owe me favors. You have nothing here." Eleanor's voice cut through the room. She had not planned to speak. The words came up from somewhere deep, from the place where she had stored every night of fear and every morning of pretending, and every time she had looked at her children's faces and known she had to get them out. She stepped around Jessie. She stood 5 feet from Edmund, and she looked at him. Not up at him, eye to eye. The way she had never been able to look at him in their house, because looking at him directly was what started the bad nights. "You have nothing here, Edmund. No partners, no club members, no dinner party friends who look the other way because you donate to their charities and pour their wine. Nobody here owes you anything. Nobody here is afraid of you. And nobody here is going to hand you 3 children so you can break them the way you tried to break me." Edmund's hands curled at his sides. His jaw was locked so tight, the muscles stood out like ropes under the skin. "You are my wife." "I am nothing of yours. I was never yours. You just hadn't figured that out yet." "Those are my children." "Those are my children. I carried them. I fed them. I held them when they cried. I stood between them and you every night you came home with that look in your eyes. And when standing between them wasn't enough anymore, I picked them up and I ran. And I will keep running for the rest of my life if that's what it takes. But I don't think I'll have to, because I'm not alone anymore." She turned to Marshal Pierce. "You want to verify the custody order? Verify it. You want to schedule a hearing? Schedule it. I will stand in front of any judge in any territory, and I will show them the scars on my body and the fear in my children's eyes, and I will tell them exactly what this man did to us. And then we'll see whose papers hold up." Pierce looked at her for a long time. He was a lawman. He had seen domestic disputes before. He had enforced custody orders that made his stomach turn. But he had a job, and the job had rules, and the rules did not care about stomach turns. 48 hours, he said to Will. "I'll grant the continuance. But after that, if no hearing is scheduled, I enforce the order as written. A hearing will be scheduled, Will said.
I'll wire Cheyenne today. Edmund looked around the room. At Will behind his desk. At Agnes with her medical records. At Jesse standing between him and Eleanor like something that would not move. At Eleanor herself, this woman who had lived in his house for 10 years and trembled when he raised his voice, and now stood in front of him in a sheriff's office in Wyoming and told him he had nothing. He smiled. It was the worst thing Eleanor had ever seen on his face. Worse than the anger. Worse than the cold, flat emptiness he wore on the bad nights. This was a smile that said, I have already thought of something you haven't. 48 hours, Edmund said. Of course. I'll wait. I'm a patient man. He walked out. The door closed behind him. Through the window, Eleanor watched him cross the street to the boarding house. Crane fell into step beside him. The hired men followed. They disappeared inside. Eleanor's legs went out from under her. Jesse caught her. His arms went around her waist, and he held her up the way he had held Sam in the blizzard, firm and steady, taking the weight without being asked. I'm fine, she said. You're shaking. I'm shaking and fine. I can be both. Agnes pushed a chair behind her, and Jesse lowered her into it. Eleanor gripped the armrests and breathed. In, out. The way she had breathed through 10 years of nights when breathing was all she could control. He smiled, she said. I saw it, Jesse said. When Edmund smiles like that, it means he has a plan. It means he's already figured out his next move, and he's just waiting for everyone else to catch up. What kind of plan? I don't know, but it won't be legal. Not entirely. Edmund uses the law when it works and goes around it when it doesn't. He's done it before. What do you mean, before? Eleanor looked up at him. There was a woman, before me. Her name was Catherine Marsh. Edmund courted her in 1870. She refused him. He had her committed to an asylum. Paid 2 doctors to sign commitment papers saying she was hysterical. The room went cold. Agnes sat down slowly. Will Davenport leaned forward at his desk. She spent 2 years in that place, Eleanor continued. A lawyer eventually got her out, proved the papers were fraudulent. But by then, the damage was done. She was never the same. How do you know this? Will asked. Edmund's first wife told me, before she died. She told me in confidence because she was afraid of what he would do if she spoke publicly. She said Catherine Marsh was proof of what Edmund did to women who defied him. She said I should leave while I still could. His first wife told you to leave? She told me to run. She said she stayed too long and it cost her everything. Will picked up his pen. I need that woman's name. Catherine Marsh. And the lawyer who got her out. And any details you remember about the commitment fraud. The lawyer's name was Arthur Pennington. He was in Boston. I don't know if he's still practicing. I'll wire Boston tonight. Will looked at Agnes. Doctor, in your professional opinion, is there sufficient evidence to suggest a pattern of predatory behavior by Mr. Hale? In my professional opinion, this man has a documented history of using legal systems to control and punish women who refuse him. The Marsh case, Eleanor's case, likely others we don't know about. Yes, Sheriff, this is a pattern. Will stood. He put on his hat with the careful deliberation of a man who was about to do something he could not undo. Then I'm not just requesting a territorial hearing. I'm wiring the U.S. Marshal's office in Cheyenne and requesting an investigation. On what grounds? Jesse asked. Fraud. If Hale used forged commitment papers against Catherine Marsh,
And if he's using a custody order obtained under questionable circumstances now, that's a federal matter. It's not just about custody anymore.
It's about whether the documents themselves are legitimate.
That'll take weeks, Agnes said. It'll take however long it takes, but it changes the game. Right now, Hale thinks he's fighting a custody dispute in a small town. If the federal marshal's office opens an investigation, he's fighting something much bigger. And men like Edmund Hale don't do well when the system they've been manipulating starts looking at them instead of for them. Jesse turned to Eleanor. Did you hear that? Eleanor was staring at the window, at the boarding house across the street where Edmund was waiting. Patient, smiling. I heard it, she said. I also know Edmund, and 48 hours is enough time for a man like him to do something desperate. Then we don't give him the chance. Jesse held out his hand. Come home. Your children are waiting. Eleanor took his hand and stood. She walked out of the sheriff's office into the afternoon light. Elk Hollow's main street stretched in both directions, and it was not empty. Hank Morrison was on the porch of his store. Frank Dawson was leaning against the livery rail. Clara Beth Hoffman stood in the doorway of her boarding house with her arms crossed, watching the hired men in her parlor the way a woman watches mud being tracked across a clean floor. And there were others. Men Eleanor did not know. Women she had never met. Standing in doorways, sitting on porches, moving through their ordinary day, but present. Visible. Watching. Hank tipped his hat as Eleanor passed. Ma'am? Frank Dawson nodded. Afternoon. Clara Beth called out. Eleanor, when you've got a minute, I've got 3 quilts and a pot of stew with your children's names on them. Eleanor's throat closed. She squeezed Jesse's hand so hard her stitches pulled, and she did not care. They rode home together. Jesse in front, Eleanor behind him, her arms around his waist, her cheek pressed against his back. She could feel his heartbeat through his coat. Steady. Constant. The heartbeat of a man who is not going anywhere. Boone met them at the gate. His tail was going, but his ears were still flat, still listening, still on guard. Jesse dismounted, and Boone pressed against his leg, and then went to Eleanor and pressed against her leg, and then turned and trotted to the house where Hannah was standing on the porch with the Winchester. Mama, I'm here, baby. Hannah set the rifle against the wall and came down the steps and walked into her mother's arms. She was shaking. She had been shaking since she heard the coach, since Frank Dawson's boy had told her what was happening in town, since she had positioned herself at the window with a gun and told Lucy to keep Sam in the back room and waited. Is he here? Hannah whispered. Is Papa here? He's in town. He's not coming to the ranch. The sheriff won't let him. But he's here. He came. He came, and he's going to leave. I promise you, Hannah. He's going to leave, and he's not taking you with him. Hannah pulled back. Her face was wet, but her eyes were hard. If he comes here, I'll shoot him. Hannah. I mean it, Mama. I learned how to hold the gun. Jesse showed me. I'll shoot him. Eleanor knelt down. She took her daughter's face in both hands, the good hand and the hurt hand, and she looked into those eyes that were too old and too hard and too brave for 11 years. You are not going to shoot anyone. You are not going to fight anyone. You are going to be 11 years old, and you are going to let the grown-ups handle this. Do you understand me? The grown-ups didn't handle it before. The words hit Eleanor in the center of her chest like a thrown stone. Because Hannah was right. The grown-ups hadn't handled it. Eleanor hadn't handled it. For years, she had stayed and hoped and tried and failed, and her children had paid for every year of trying. I know, Eleanor said. I know they didn't, and I'm sorry for that. I'm sorry for every day I stayed when I should have left. But I'm handling it now. and I'm not alone this time." She looked up at Jesse, who was standing by the porch with his hat in his hands, waiting. "Neither are you," Eleanor said to her daughter. "Neither are any of us." Lucy came out of the house holding Sam's hand. The boy had the rag doll in his other arm. He saw Jesse, and he did not flinch. He did not reach for him, but he did not hide either. He stood there and looked at Jesse with those brown eyes that were slowly, day by day, learning to see a man's hands without expecting them to hurt. Boone circled all of them once, then lay down across the porch steps like a barricade, his chin on his paws, his eyes on the road, watching, waiting. The sun was going down over the mountains, and the shadows were long across the snow, and the light was turning the whole valley gold. Eleanor stood on the porch of a stranger's house that had become the closest thing to home she had ever known, with her children around her and a man behind her and a dog at her feet. And she felt something she had not felt in so long she had forgotten its name. Not safety, not yet, but the thing that comes before safety, the thing that makes safety possible. Belief. The stubborn, irrational, unbreakable belief that this time, the ending would be different. "Mama," Sam said. Everyone stopped. Eleanor looked down. Sam was looking up at her with the doll pressed against his chest, and his hand still in Lucy's grip. "Mama, is Boone staying?" It was the first full sentence he had spoken to her in 6 weeks. 5 words. Is Boone staying? Not, is Papa coming? Not, are we safe? Is Boone staying? Because for a 5-year-old boy, who had learned that the world was full of things that grabbed and hurt and locked doors behind them, the only question that mattered was whether the one creature who had never scared him would still be there tomorrow. Eleanor knelt down. She pulled her son into her arms and held him against her heart, and she did not trust herself to speak. Jesse answered for her. "Boone's staying, Sam. He ain't going anywhere. Not tomorrow, not ever." The dog's tail thumped twice against the porch steps, and Sam, still pressed against his mother's chest, reached out one small hand toward the sound and laid it on Boone's head. The night came on. The stars appeared. The cold settled over the valley like a blanket made of iron. And inside the ranch house, Eleanor Sullivan locked the door, checked the bolt, and for the first time did not sit against the wall, watching the windows. She sat in the rocking chair by the fire, with Lucy in her lap and Sam at her feet, leaning against Boone and Hannah beside her, reading the battered copy of Moby Dick she had found in the loft. Jesse was in the barn. The distance was still there. 3 feet, 30 yards, whatever she needed. He gave it without being asked. He always gave it without being asked. But tonight, before he left, he had stopped at the door and looked back at her, and she had looked back at him, and something passed between them that was not a word and not a touch, but was somehow louder than both. Tomorrow, Edmund would make his move. She was sure of it. The smile had told her everything. He was not going to wait for hearings and judges and proper channels. Edmund Hale did not lose. Edmund Hale had never lost. And a man who had never lost did not know how to do it gracefully. Eleanor pulled her children closer and listened to the fire and the wind and the steady breathing of a dog who had chosen them and would not be moved. Whatever came tomorrow, she would meet it standing up. She had been on her knees long enough. Edmund came before dawn. Eleanor woke to Boone's growl. Not the low warning sound he made when coyotes crossed the fence line. This was deeper, guttural. The sound an animal makes when something wrong is moving in the dark. She was off the floor before her eyes were open. Hannah sat up beside her. Lucy whimpered in her sleep. Sam was already awake, pressed against Boone, his eyes wide in the dying firelight. hooves on frozen ground, more than one horse, coming fast up the ranch road. Eleanor grabbed the Winchester. She checked the chamber. Full. She moved to the window. 4 riders, coming hard through the pre-dawn dark, breath steaming from the horses. No lanterns. Edmund's hired men. And behind them, on foot, moving fast along the tree line where the snow was thin, a 5th figure. Tall, long coat. Silas Crane. Hannah, take Sam and Lucy to the root cellar, now. Mama! Root cellar. Lock the hatch from inside. Do not come out until I come for you or Jesse comes for you. Nobody else. Do you understand? Hannah grabbed her brother and sister. Lucy was crying, quiet, the practiced silence of a child who had learned that noise was dangerous. Sam clutched the rag doll and did not make a sound. Hannah pulled them through the kitchen to the cellar hatch, and Eleanor heard the door close and the bolt slide, and then nothing. Boone was at the front door. His body was rigid, every muscle drawn tight, teeth showing. He was not barking. He was waiting. Eleanor levered around into the Winchester and opened the door. The first rider was in the yard. He pulled up when he saw her standing on the porch with the rifle. The second and third riders came in behind him, fanning out. The fourth hung back near the fence. "That's far enough," Eleanor said. "Mrs. Hale?" The lead rider's voice was flat, professional. "Mr. Hale has instructed us to collect his children. We have legal authority." "You have nothing. The sheriff issued a continuance. No one comes near these children until the hearing." "Mr. Hale's understanding is that the continuance has been withdrawn." "Mr. Hale's understanding is wrong. Get off this property." The second rider moved his horse to the left, circling toward the barn. Eleanor swung the Winchester toward him. "I said, get off this property. Next man who moves gets a warning he won't walk away from." The riders looked at each other. They were hired men, not gunfighters. They had been paid to intimidate a woman and 3 children, not to get shot by one. But they had also been paid well, and the man who paid them was not someone who accepted failure. "Eleanor!" The voice came from behind the riders. Edmund walked out of the dark. He had come on foot behind them, letting them draw her attention while he approached from the side. He was wearing his traveling coat, his hands gloved, his face calm. The smile from the sheriff's office was gone. What was there now was worse. Nothing. A blank face. The face he wore on the worst nights. "It's over," he said. "I've spoken with Marshal Pierce. The continuance was based on medical testimony that I have formally challenged. Pierce has agreed that the custody order stands pending review, and that review can happen after the children are returned to my care." "You're lying." "I'm a lawyer, Eleanor. I don't need to lie. I just need to read the law more carefully than the people trying to use it against me." The sheriff is asleep in his bed because I filed my challenge with the marshal at midnight. Pierce outranks your sheriff. And Pierce has agreed that medical affidavits from a frontier doctor do not constitute sufficient grounds to override a Massachusetts court order. That's the law. I didn't write it. I just know how to use it. Eleanor's hands were shaking. She gripped the rifle tighter. "You're not taking them." "I'm taking them home, where they belong, where they've always belonged. And you can come with us, or you can stay here in this sad little ranch and explain to your cowboy why you couldn't stop what was always going to happen." Boone lunged. The dog cleared the porch steps in one bound and went straight for Edmund. Not the riders, not the horses. Edmund. He hit Edmund at the knees, and the man staggered back. Boone's teeth caught the sleeve of his coat and held, not biting through, holding, pinning him. Edmund kicked. His polished boot caught Boone in the ribs. The dog yelped and fell back. Eleanor screamed. A rifle shot split the morning air. Everybody froze. The riders' horses spooked. Edmund stumbled against the fence. Boone scrambled to his feet, limping but standing, teeth bared. Jesse was on the ridge behind the barn. He had come up through the back pasture on foot, the Winchester in his hands, and the shot had gone straight into the sky. A warning. The loudest warning he knew how to give. "Next one ain't aimed at the clouds," Jesse said. His voice carried through the cold air, clear as a church bell. "Get away from her." "Thornton, this doesn't concern—" "I said get away from her." Jesse came down the ridge, not running, walking. The rifle up, the stock against his shoulder, his eye on the sights. Behind him, coming over the ridge in a line, were more men. Frank Dawson with his 3 sons, the Miller brothers, old Pete Garza and his nephew, Hank Morrison with his ancient shotgun. One after another, they crested the ridge and spread out along the fence line. 14 men, armed, silent. Standing in the frozen dark before sunrise, because a woman they barely knew was in trouble, and that was enough. The hired riders looked at the ridge. They looked at each other. The one nearest the fence turned his horse and rode out. The second followed. The third hesitated, looked at Edmund, and then rode after them. The fourth rider stayed. He was older than the others, harder. He had a hand on his sidearm, and he was looking at Jesse the way a man looks at a problem he's measuring. Crane stepped out of the tree line. He walked into the yard slowly, his hands visible, his long coat open. "It's done, Hale," Crane said. "It's not done. Pierce gave you nothing. I was at the marshal's quarters when you went to him at midnight. He told you the continuance stands and that he'd enforce it in the morning. You heard what you wanted to hear, because that's what you do." Edmund turned on Crane. The blank face cracked, and something hot and ugly came through. "You work for me. I worked for you. Past tense. I was hired to find a woman and 3 children. I found them. Contract's done. I'll destroy you. You'll try, and you'll fail. Because I've been tracking people for 12 years, and I know where every skeleton in every closet is buried, including yours. Catherine Marsh, remember her? The woman you put in an asylum because she wouldn't marry you?" Edmund went white. "I'm a detective, Hale. Finding things is what I do. And I found the Marsh file 3 days ago, when I started wondering what kind of man sends 4 armed riders to a ranch in the middle of the night to steal children from their mother." Crane reached into his coat and pulled out a folded telegram. "This is from Arthur Pennington, Catherine Marsh's attorney. He's alive, he's practicing, and he's been waiting 20 years for someone to reopen that case. I wired him yesterday." "You had no right." "I had every right. You hired me to find the truth. You just didn't expect me to find yours." Crane dropped the telegram at Edmund's feet, the way a man drops something that's outlived its use. "I told your wife I wouldn't help you take those children. I meant it." He walked to his horse, mounted, and looked at Eleanor on the porch. "You pull left on every 3rd shot, Mrs. Sullivan. Remember that." He rode out. His horse's hooves crunched through the frozen snow and faded into the dark. Edmund stood alone in the yard. No riders, no Crane, no marshal. Just a man in a fine coat with mud on his boots, and a line of armed ranchers on the ridge above him, and a dog limping between him and the porch, growling steady and low and absolute. "Edmund!" Eleanor came down the porch steps. She set the Winchester against the rail. She walked into the yard and stopped 6 feet from the man who had owned her for 10 years. "Go home." "You think this is over?" "I think you're standing in the dirt at 5 in the morning with no one left. I think your hired men are gone. I think your detective just turned on you. I think the marshal is going to wake up in 2 hours and find out you tried to take children in the middle of the night in violation of his continuance. And I think every man on that ridge is going to testify to what they saw here today. A territorial hearing won't hold. I'll appeal. I'll take it to federal court. You'll lose. Because Catherine Marsh's file is open now. Because Dr. Marsh in Boston is going to testify. Because Agnes Whitmore has 12 pages of medical records. Because my daughter can show a judge exactly where you grabbed her arm and twisted until the bone broke. And because every person in this valley is going to stand up and say what they saw and what they know and what kind of man you really are. She stepped closer. 5 feet. 4. You spent 20 years controlling women with paper and fear. You thought you could do it again. But paper only works when everyone agrees to believe it. And fear only works when the person you're scaring is alone. She gestured at the ridge, at Jesse with his rifle, at Frank Dawson and his sons, at Hank Morrison, at Pete Garza, at all of them, standing in the cold before sunrise because they chose to. I'm not alone, Edmund, and I will never be alone again. Not because of Jesse, not because of this town. Because I finally understand something it took me 10 years to learn. I don't need someone to save me. I just need people who are willing to stand next to me while I save myself. And I found them. Edmund looked at her. His face worked through something. Rage to calculation, to something that might have been the very first moment of understanding that he had truly lost. Not temporarily, not tactically, completely. Those are my children, he said. But the words were hollow now. The force behind them was gone. Those are my children, and they are never going to be afraid of you again. Boone limped forward and stood beside Eleanor. His growl had stopped. He just stood there, one brown eye and one blue eye fixed on Edmund, calm and certain and absolutely immovable. Edmund looked at the dog. He looked at the woman. He looked at the men on the ridge. And then he did the only thing he had left to do. He turned around and walked down the ranch road toward town. Alone. His polished boots leaving tracks in the snow that the morning sun would erase before noon. Nobody followed him. Nobody needed to. Eleanor watched him go until the road bent and he disappeared, and the only thing left was footprints and silence. Then her knees went, and she sat down in the snow, and Boone was in her lap, and her face was in his fur, and she was shaking so hard her teeth hurt. Jesse came down from the ridge. He knelt beside her in the snow and did not touch her. He just knelt there and waited, the way he always waited, giving her the space to break without making her feel broken. "Is he gone?" she asked into Boone's neck. "He's gone." "He kicked Boone." "I saw. Boone's all right. Bruised ribs, maybe. Agnes will check him." "He kicked my dog." She said it again, and her voice cracked on the word, my, and something in that word held everything. Not just the dog, the ranch, the town, the man kneeling beside her, the life she was building from nothing. My, the word she had not been allowed to use for 10 years. "Jesse, I'm here. Get my children." He went to the root cellar. He knocked 3 times and said his name, and Hannah opened the hatch. The girl came out first, the kitchen knife in her hand, her eyes wild. She saw the empty yard. She saw the men on the ridge. She saw her mother sitting in the snow with the dog. "Mama!" She ran. Lucy came after her, stumbling, crying, and then Sam, holding the rag doll, moving slow, looking at everything with those careful brown eyes. Eleanor caught all three of them. She pulled them down into the snow beside her and wrapped her arms around them and held on. Hannah pressed her face into Eleanor's shoulder. Lucy burrowed into her chest. Sam crawled into the space between his sisters and found Boone and held on to the dog's fur with one hand and his mother's coat with the other. Jesse stood up and stepped back. Frank Dawson was beside him. Hank Morrison, Pete Garza, the Miller brothers, all of them standing in the early light, watching a mother hold her children in the snow, saying nothing because nothing needed to be said. Hank blew his nose into a handkerchief the size of a saddle blanket. "Damn cold morning," he muttered, "making my eyes water." "Sure, Hank," Frank said. "It's the cold." The territorial hearing took place 3 weeks later in Cheyenne. Eleanor testified for 4 hours. She did not cry. She did not waver. She sat in a wooden chair in a cold courtroom and told the truth about every bruise, every broken bone, every locked door. Every night she lay awake, listening for footsteps. She told it flat and steady, the way she had told Jesse in the cabin that first night, because the truth did not need drama. The truth was enough. Agnes testified. Dr. Thomas Marsh sent a sworn deposition from Boston that made the judge set down his pen and press his hand over his eyes. Arthur Pennington appeared in person with the complete Catherine Marsh file, 20 years of evidence that proved Edmund Hale had used legal systems to imprison and control women who defied him. Sheriff Will Davenport testified about the pre-dawn raid on the ranch. Marshal Pierce, who had been furious when he learned what Edmund had attempted under cover of his continuance, testified that Hale had misrepresented their conversation and acted outside the bounds of any authority granted to him. And Silas Crane testified. He sat in the witness chair with his long coat folded over his knee and his hat in his hands, and he told the court exactly what he had seen. A boy who would not speak, a girl who held a knife, a mother who bluffed with an empty gun because it was all she had left. He told them about the pre-dawn raid and the hired men, and Edmund kicking a dog that was trying to protect the family. The judge, a man named Robert Clearwater, who had been on the territorial bench for 15 years and had no patience for men who confused wealth with virtue, listened to everything. He revoked the custody order. He granted Eleanor full custody of all 3 children. He issued a restraining order barring Edmund Hale from contact with Eleanor or the children. And he referred the case to the federal attorney's office for investigation of judicial fraud, witness intimidation, and conspiracy in connection with the Catherine Marsh commitment. Edmund Hale was arrested in Cheyenne before he could board the train home. Eleanor got the news by telegram. She read it standing in Agnes's clinic, with Jesse beside her and Boone at her feet, and Hannah looking over her shoulder, because Hannah always looked over her shoulder now. Not out of fear, but because she wanted to see what happened next. "Arrested," Eleanor said. "Federal charges," Agnes read. "Fraud, intimidation, conspiracy, and Thomas Marsh filed a complaint in Boston. The Massachusetts Medical Board is investigating the doctors who signed Catherine Marsh's commitment papers." "Catherine," Eleanor whispered. "Catherine," Agnes confirmed. "They're finally listening." Eleanor folded the telegram. She pressed it against her chest the way she had pressed her children against her chest in the snow, holding proof that the world could change, that paper and money and a bought judge were not always enough, that sometimes, if you stood up long enough and loud enough and found enough people willing to stand with you, the wall came down. Spring came to the valley the way spring always came to Wyoming, sudden and violent and impossibly beautiful. The snow melted, the creeks filled, the grass came up green on the hillsides, and the cattle moved to higher pasture, and Boone's ribs healed, and he went back to herding with the focused joy of a dog who had been made for exactly this work. Eleanor did not move into Jesse's cabin. She took the bunkhouse, the way she had always planned, and made it her own. Her books on a shelf Jesse built for her, her mother's Bible on the nightstand, a medical kit Agnes had given her, because Eleanor had started helping at the clinic 3 days a week and discovered that healing other people was a way of healing herself. Hannah put the knife away. Not all at once. It stayed on the floor beside her bed for 2 weeks. Then it moved to the shelf. Then to the drawer. Then one morning it was just gone. And Hannah did not mention it, and nobody asked. Lucy talked. To Boone, to the goats, to anyone who stood still long enough. She talked about Elizabeth the doll, and about the stars, and about how Jezebel the goat had eaten Jesse's only good shirt, and how Boone could understand English, but pretended not to when he did not feel like obeying. And Sam spoke, not all at once, not in full sentences, but piece by piece, word by word, the way a frozen river thaws. First to Boone, then to Lucy, then to Hannah. Then one morning in the barn, while Jesse was mending a harness, and Sam was sitting on the hay bale pushing a blunt needle through scrap leather the way Jesse had shown him, the boy looked up and said, "Jesse, I can't get the thread through." Jesse's hands stopped. He breathed in. He breathed out. He reached over and guided Sam's fingers on the needle and said, "Push harder. Leather fights you. You've got to show it who's boss." Like Boone shows the cattle? Exactly like that. Sam pushed the needle through. He held up the leather and showed Jesse, and his face did something that Jesse had never seen it do before. He smiled. Jesse excused himself. He walked behind the barn and stood there with his back against the wall, and his hat pulled down over his eyes, and his chest heaving. He pressed his fist against his mouth and made no sound. When he came back, Sam was still sewing. Boone was lying beside him. The boy was humming something, tuneless and small, the sound of a child who had forgotten to be afraid. The proposal happened in April. Not because Jesse planned it, because Eleanor made it happen. The way she made everything happen, directly, without ceremony, and on her own terms. They were on the porch, evening. The mountains had snow on the peaks, but the valley was warm. The children were inside. Hannah was reading to Sam from Moby Dick. Lucy was braiding Boone's fur into patterns the dog tolerated with the suffering patience of a saint. "I've been thinking," Eleanor said. "About what?" "About how long you're going to keep sleeping in that barn." Jesse looked at her. "I sleep in the barn because I needed space. I had space. I've had 4 months of space. And now I'm sitting on this porch every evening, watching you walk 30 yards to sleep alone in the hay when there is a perfectly good rocking chair inside that nobody is using." "You want me to sleep in the rocking chair?" "I want you to stop being noble and start being practical." "I don't follow." Eleanor turned to face him. The last light was on her face, and her eyes were the color of the sky before a storm, and she was looking at him the way she had looked at him in the sheriff's office the day she told Edmund he had nothing. "Jesse Thornton, I have been independent for 4 months. I have a job. I have a home. I have my children. I have a dog who likes me better than he likes you. I have everything I swore I would get for myself. And now I am choosing, freely, with no gun and no blizzard and no man chasing me, to ask you to come inside." Jesse took off his hat. He turned it in his hands. "Eleanor, I don't want you to feel. I feel exactly what I want to feel. Don't you dare tell me what I feel." "I wasn't." "You were about to. You were about to say something noble and patient and self-sacrificing, and I love that about you. But right now, I need you to stop it and answer me." "You haven't asked a question." "Fine. Will you marry me?" Jesse dropped his hat. Boone barked from inside. Lucy shouted, "Mama said something, and Jesse dropped his hat." "That's not how I pictured this going," Jesse said. "How did you picture it?" "I had a ring. I bought it from Hank 3 weeks ago. It's in the barn in my coat pocket. I was going to take you to the creek where I found you, and I was going to say something about the blizzard and how—" "Say yes, Jesse." "I'm trying to, Jesse." He looked at her. This woman. This fierce, stubborn, unbreakable woman who had carried 3 children through hell and pointed an empty gun at his chest and put her hand in his on a cold porch in Wyoming and changed everything about his life without asking permission. "Yes," he said. "God, yes." She kissed him. She grabbed his shirt and pulled him forward and kissed him, and it was not gentle, and it was not careful, and it was not 3 feet apart. It was 10 years of clenched fists finally opening. It was the first warm day after the longest winter. Hannah appeared in the doorway. She looked at her mother kissing Jesse on the porch. She looked at Lucy, who was jumping up and down. She looked at Sam, who was watching from behind Boone with something on his face that was almost wonder. "Finally," Hannah said, and she went back inside. They married in June. Agnes performed the ceremony because Elk Hollow did not have a preacher, and Agnes said she had married more people than most preachers anyway, and she wasn't about to let some stranger do it when she'd been waiting for this since December. The whole valley came. Frank Dawson, the Miller brothers, Pete Garza and his family, Hank Morrison, who cried into a saddle blanket handkerchief, Clara Beth Hoffman, who brought enough food for 60 people and took notes because Clara Beth always took notes. Will Davenport stood at the back in his best coat, watching the road out of habit. Hannah stood beside her mother holding flowers. Lucy stood beside Jesse holding Boone's collar, because someone had to. Sam stood between them, holding nothing, needing nothing, just standing there in the sun with his face turned up to the light. When Agnes said the words, Eleanor did not say, "I do." She said, "I choose." Because that was the whole point. That was the whole story. Not rescue, not salvation. Choice. The most powerful word she had ever learned. Jesse said, "I choose right back." Boone barked once. Lucy lost her grip on his collar, and the dog ran 3 circles around the wedding party, and then lay down across Eleanor's feet and refused to move for the rest of the ceremony. Agnes stepped over him twice. That evening, after the guests had gone and the children were asleep, and the valley was quiet under a sky so wide it made your heart ache, Eleanor and Jesse sat on the porch the way they always sat on the porch, but not 3 feet apart. Not anymore. "Jesse?" "Yeah?" "Thank you. For the barn. For the distance. For every time you stepped back so I could step forward. I know what it cost you." "It didn't cost me anything." "Liar." "All right. It cost me everything. But I'd pay it again." She leaned into him. His arm went around her. Boone lay across their feet. "I want to tell you something," she said. "Something I figured out on that road, somewhere between Omaha and here, while I was carrying Sam through the snow with an empty gun and no idea where I was going. Tell me. Love isn't someone saving you. Love isn't someone standing in front of you and taking the bullet. Love is someone standing beside you and waiting until you're ready to take the shot yourself. That's what you did, Jesse. You didn't save me. You stood beside me and you waited. And that's worth more than every rescue in every story ever told." Jesse pressed his lips to her hair. "I didn't do it alone." "No?" "Boone found you first. I just followed." She laughed. The full laugh. The real one. The one that had come back piece by piece over 4 months and now lived in this house and belonged to this valley and could not be taken away again.
Years later, when people in Elk Hollow told the story of Eleanor Sullivan, they told it the way good stories get told in small towns, around fires and over fences, and in the general store, where Hank Morrison would lean on the counter and say he remembered it like it was yesterday. They told about the blizzard and the empty gun and the 3 children in a dead cabin. They told about a rancher who slept in his barn for 4 months, and a doctor who fought with paperwork, and a sheriff who read every document twice. They told about a town that stood in the cold before sunrise because standing was the right thing to do. And when they got to the end, when someone new asked what the story meant, what it was really about, old Hank would get quiet for a moment, and then he'd say the same thing every time. It's about a dog who ran into a blizzard because he heard something the rest of us couldn't. And he found a woman and 3 children, and he lay down beside them, and he refused to move. And everything that happened after that, every bit of it, happened because one stubborn dog decided that those people were his, and that was that. And somewhere in a ranch house in the valley, old now and gray and slow, but still bright-eyed, still watchful, still absolutely certain about the things that mattered, Boone would thump his tail against the floor and rest his head on his paws and close his eyes. Not because the story was over, because it had never needed an ending. It just needed someone who refused to move.